All right, we'll start in Hebrews 11, which we've read a lot, but we'll read again. And then I'm actually going to read it in Walter's Working Translation because it's a little clearer.
Which translation?
Working Translation. It's Walter Cummins' Journey Through Exodus. Fancy books there. And we're going to start in verse 31. Tonight we're going to talk about Rehab, Barak, and Jephthah, which I'm sure everyone knows lots about those people. Or not. All right, verse 31 of Hebrews 11 says, "By believing the harlot innkeeper Rehab did not perish with those who were disobedient after she received the spies with peace. What more should I say? But for the time will fail me if I explain in detail about Gideon, Barak, Samson, Jephthah, David, Samuel, and the prophets." So I find it really interesting that these people are actually in this hall of faith, I guess you could call it, because it's David. Pretty much lots of people know about David. Pretty much lots of people know about Samson. There's a couple other people. Jephthah doesn't really come to mind, like first. Maybe Rehab. I don't know if you know anything about Rehab, but we'll go to Joshua 2, and then I'll have people read. But basically, these people are mentioned because they had strong believing in God. And they mentioned that, like Mary told last week, that, you know, things weren't written down, it was passed on by like oral tradition and stories and things like that. So they knew of Christ's coming, but Christ had not come yet. So they believed God that Christ was coming and that there were certain things that were going to be into place. So they're going to stand. Which thank God Rehab did, because she was part of the Christ line. So minor detail if she did not. And they also believe that God was going to work with them in the different situations that they're in. So it's like, yes, we believe that Christ is coming, and these are the different signs that we know of, but in the different situations they're put in their life. I'm going to have, who wants to read long portions?
I can read it.
Everyone's hands will be raised.
Mine.
Well, no, you don't get to read long portions. But, okay, so we're going to start in Joshua 2. Tiffy, why don't you read verses 1 through 10?
Okay.
And we're going to start with Rehab.
And Joshua the son of Nun sent out of Shittim 2 men to spy secretly, saying, "Go view the land, even Jericho." And they went and came into an harlot's house, named Rehab, and lodged there. And it was told the king of Jericho, saying, "Behold, there came men in hither tonight of the children of Israel to search out the country." And the king of Jericho sent unto Rehab, saying, "Bring forth the men that are come to thee, which are entered into thine house, for they be come to search out all the country." And the woman took the 2 men and hid them, and said thus, "There came men unto me, but I wist not whence they were." And it came to pass, about the time of shutting of the gate, when it was dark, that the men went out. Whither the men went, I wot not. Pursue after them quickly, for ye shall overtake them. But she had brought them up to the roof of the house, and hid them with the stalks of flax, which she had laid in order upon the roof. And the men pursued after them the way to Jordan unto the fords. And as soon as they which pursued after them were gone out, they shut the gate. And before they were laid down, she came up unto them upon the roof. And she said unto them, she said unto the men, "I know that the Lord hath given you the land, and that your terror is fallen upon us, and that all the inhabitants of the land faint because of you. For we have heard how the Lord dried up the water of the Red Sea for you, when you came out of Egypt, and what ye did unto the 2 kings of the Amorites that were on the other side of Jordan, Sihon and Og, whom ye utterly destroyed."
That verse 10?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Okay, so basically set the scene. So Moses is dead. Joshua just took over. Wall of Jericho is about to happen. So, if you've seen that VeggieTale, Josh and the Big Wall, where they throw slushies over and the water's destroyed. Okay, so basically that's right after Rahab, because Joshua sends his two guys to go spy out the land and figure out the weak spots and like what's going on. And so it hasn't happened yet, but it's about to. So Rahab, if you actually look at the word harlot, it's not like a prostitute or like David's, girlfriend on the roof or anything like that. The word harlot's actually used for innkeeper, and it's because she wouldn't wear the certain veil that as a woman in that time period you had to wear to talk to people. So as an innkeeper, she didn't wear that, and she would talk to anybody and anybody, just to try and like bring them into the house. But because of where she lived at that time period, she's in Jericho, this is where she's living. Normally you don't hide Russian spies in your house so they can go blow up your land. But, like it says earlier, she's like, I know that this is the one true God's land. 40 years earlier was when Red Sea crossing happened and Moses happened, and so that got passed on. I mean, Pharaoh was the biggest army, and that got destroyed, so that's probably passed on pretty quickly, you'd think. So she wasn't alive during that time, so it got passed on, and she knows that, okay, this is the one true God's land, this is where they need to go through. So a couple years prior to Rahab is what kind of brought the one true God back to the people's mind, was when the Amorites kings got destroyed. And they're like, oh, okay, that God that you heard about 40 years earlier destroyed Pharaoh's army, guess what, he just destroyed the Amorites. Okay, some other things are going to happen. So Rehab is like, okay, I'm going to put myself out on a limb here because I'm trusting that the one true God is going to continue to say what he's going to do. Because if not, she's pretty much dead. She's hiding other people's spies in her land, so, it's not a normal thing that you do. Read verse 11 through 14.
And as soon as we had heard these things, our hearts did melt, neither did there remain any more courage in any man because of you. For the Lord your God, he is God in heaven above, and in earth beneath. Now therefore I pray you, swear unto me by the Lord, since I have showed you kindness, that ye will also show kindness unto my father's house, and give me a true token. And that ye will save alive my father, and my mother, and my brethren, and my sisters, and all that they have, and deliver our lives from death. And the men answered her, Our life for yours, if ye utter not this our business. And it shall be, when the Lord hath given us the land, that we will deal kindly and truly with thee.
So, Rahab, like when I talked about in Hebrews, where it talks about Rahab had the spies enter with peace. So, she's having these two spies that are going to destroy their land, the land that she's currently living in. She's trusting that God, there's a reason why this is all happening. And she's trusting that God put her in this position to kind of pave the way for the next step. So she's respecting the power of God, and she's just like, okay, I'm going to hide you guys, but I want in return my family's life. Pretty reasonable, right? You'd think. Flip to Josh, actually no, just kidding. 15 through 24.
Okay. 15. Then she let them down by a cord through the window, for her house was upon the town wall, and she dwelt upon the wall. And she said unto them, Get you to the mountain, lest the pursuers meet you, and hide yourselves there 3 days, until the pursuers be returned, and afterward may ye go your way. And the men said unto her, We will be blameless of this thine oath which thou hast made us swear. Behold, when we come into the land, thou shalt bind this line of scarlet thread in the window which thou didst let us down by. And thou shalt bring thy father, and thy mother, and thy brethren, and all thy father's household home unto thee. And it shall be that whosoever shall go out of the doors of thy house, into the street, his blood shall be upon his head, and we will be guiltless. And whosoever shall be with thee in the house, his blood shall be on our head, if any hand be upon him. And if thou utter this our business, then we will be quit of thine oath which thou hast made us to swear.
So she's going on a pretty decent limb. These two spies have been sent by Joshua to go over Jericho. They're spotted and they hide in Rahab's house. So Rahab had, two choices. She could be like, yo, they're right here, take them out of my inn, I don't want to die. Or she can trust that, okay, there's a reason why this is happening. I know that the one true God, this is the land that they need, this is what God promised them, this is what's happening. So she asked, okay, this is what's going to happen, I want my family's lives in return. So she hides them, and then when the guards come around, he's like, oh, they went away, I don't know what happened to them. But they're hiding over. Flip over to Joshua 6. And then Andrew will have you read. Joshua 6. So, spies escape, go to Joshua, and they're like, yo, this is how Jericho looks, this is how it's lined up. If you actually look at the history of Jericho, Jericho's was set on a fault line. So when they stomped around, a bunch of times, oh, look at that, walls collapsed. It's really cool. Andrew, if you want to read 6 verses 22 through 24.
Sure. Joshua 6:22. But Joshua had said unto the two men that had spied out the country, Go into the harlot's house, bring out thence the woman, and all that she hath, as ye swear unto her. And the young men that were spies went in, and brought out Rahab, and her father and her mother and her brethren, and all that she had, and they brought out all her kindred, and left them outside the camp of Israel. And they burnt the city with fire, and all that was therein. Only the silver and the gold and the vessels of brass and of iron they put into the treasury of the house of the Lord.
One more.
And Joshua saved Rahab, the harlot, alive, and her father's household, and all that she had. And she dwells in Israel even unto this day, because she hid the messengers which Joshua sent to spy out Jericho.
Well, look at that. That's very good. That I did that way, right? Oh, look, God's faithful back then. Weird, right? So, if in Matthew chapter 1, you don't have to turn there, but chapter 1, verse 5, it lists and this person gave birth to this person, begat this person, blah, blah, blah. So, has anyone heard of Ruth? So, Rahab and her husband, Salmon, it's not pronounced that, but it looks like that. Salmon gave birth to Boaz, and Boaz married Ruth, and Ruth was part of the Christ line. So had Rahab been like, yo, the spies are in my house, well, you know how that ends. Not very well for us. Right? So her believing that she's having these two spies that are in her house to go destroy her town, basically, made way for the Christ line, which is pretty cool, because she could have been like, could have gone two different ways here, but she stood that knowing that God was faithful and that whatever may the situation be, that he's going to make things come to pass according to his plan. So we're going to learn about Barak, and we'll go to Judges 4. Which is cool that, because when I was looking at this, I didn't realize that Rehab was part of the Christ line, so I started looking at the name, and I'm like, oh, that's cool, because that would have sucked. Jessica could tell her Boaz joke later. That's a good one. Okay, so Barak, not Obama. So, Judges 4. Natalie, you want to read verses 2 through 5?
And the Lord sold them into the hand of Jabin, king of Canaan, who reigned in Hazor. The commander of his army was Sisera, who lived in Harosheth Hagoyim. Then the people of Israel cried out to the Lord for help, for he had 900 chariots of iron, and he oppressed the people of Israel cruelly for 20 years. Now Deborah, a prophetess, the wife of Lepideth, was judging Israel at that time.
Read through.
Sorry.
No, you're good.
Okay. She used to sit under the palm of Deborah between Ramah and Bethel in the hill country of Ephraim, and the people of Israel came up to her for judgment. She sent and summoned Barak the son of Abinoam from Kadesh Naphtali, and said to him, Has not the Lord the God of Israel commanded you? Go gather your men at Mount Tabor, taking 10,000 from the people of Naphtali and the people of Zebulun. And I will draw out Sisera, the general of Jabin's army, to me by the river Kishon with his chariots and his troops, and I will give him into your hand.
So, it's interesting that Hebrews 11 talks about Barak, because we're gonna kind of summarize the story, but the verses are all there, we can read later. So Deborah is a prophetess, which there's only 12, I think is the women that are prophetess. And it's interesting, it doesn't mention Deborah in Hebrews 11 when it talks about Barak, which we'll see in a little bit that Barak was, fun guy. But he put his trust more so in Deborah hearing from God versus him hearing from God. But we'll see kind of how it goes back and forth. This is the time period of the judges because all the people of Israel were like whining that they wanted a judge instead of God to judge them, which didn't really work out for them very well. But at least for short periods of time throughout that time, they had somebody with the Spirit of God working with them. Deborah was one of them. So, David, you want to read verses 6 through 9?
Okay. One day she sent for Barak, son of Abinoam, who lived in Kadesh, land of Naphtali. She said to him, This is what the Lord, the God of Israel, commands you. Call out 10,000 warriors from the tribes of Naphtali and Zebulun at Mount Tabor. And I will call out Sisera, commander of Jabin's army, along with his chariots and warriors to the Kishon River. There I will give you victory over him. Barak told her, I will go, but only if you go with me. Very well, she replied, I will go with you, but you will receive no honor in this venture, for the Lord's victory over Sisera will be at the hands of a woman. So Deborah went with Barak to Kadesh.
So if you just stop the story there and you're like, well, why is Barak in the Hall of Faith if this doesn't really make a whole lot of sense? Well, at least to me. You're like, So during that time period, or I guess during lots of time period, women weren't, it's very rare for like a soldier to listen to orders from a woman. So Barak putting his faith into Deborah, who was a prophetess who had that Spirit of God, and he's like, all right, okay, but I kind of want you to go with me because you can hear from God better than I can, and I kind of want, He's outgunned. He's going up to a big army. Yeah, he has 10,000 troops, but Sisera had chariots, and at that time period, if you had chariots, you won automatically, basically. So Barak wanted Deborah to go with him. So he, Deborah had that authority given to her by God. So he obeyed a woman, which was rare in that time period. And then he was like, okay, well, I might be outdone, but if this is what, God says is going to happen, then all right, let's go to war. Deborah's like, because you didn't, trust just directly in God, you trusted in God, but you kind of had a little side plan B going. The king's death will go to a woman. And he's like, all right, well, whatever. So, summary of the next chapter is basically, all right, so Barak led his 10,000 men to destroy the Canaanite army. Sisera, the commander of King Jabin's army, had the advantage because he had 900 chariots and all this crazy stuff. They should have won. But then a massive rainstorm happened, muddied up the water. Guess what? Chariots can't move in the middle of mud. So all of Sisera's chariots were destroyed. The river overflowed. All the Canaanites swept away. Army pretty much destroyed, except for Sisera, the head guy of the army, escaped. So then he escaped to Jael's tent, and Jael and her husband were neutral in the war. So they were like Switzerland. So in that time period, you had a tent and you had different sections for men and women automatically. So the space for the women, you couldn't go, no matter what. The women were primarily there. The police couldn't go there. Nobody could go there. If you went to that part of the tent, you'd automatically be sentenced to death. Like, that was a big no-no. No. Okay, so Jael, who's neutral in the war, invites Sisera into her tent. She puts him in the men's section to hide. So in the following verses, she makes 3 different covenants with Sisera. So the first covenant is covering him with a mantle, which is like, I'm going to protect you with anything that comes across. I will protect you. I'm making a vow to you. And when you did that back in that time period, you did not break it because it was sentenced to death. So first covenant she makes with him is, I'm going to place this mantle over you, and I'm going to protect you. Then they do a salt covenant where she offers him milk. Milk was salted in that time period, so if you had a salt covenant, you meant what you said what you meant, you don't break salt covenant, or else guess what? You die. Okay? So that's number 2. Number 3 is she said that if anyone approached her tent, she would lie and be like, yo, nobody's here. Okay? So 3 covenants with this king. Well, a little while later, you find out that Sisera's dead in the woman's section of the tent with a giant nail through his head. And you're like, what just happened? Why is this happening? So Jael made 3 covenants with Sisera, but Sisera still did not trust her. So the nail in the head represents the unbelief that Sisera had. So then here comes Barak after defeating that army, and he comes up to the tent, and Jael's like, yo, body's in the back. So she gets the credit for the kill, basically. But he basically sentenced himself to death because A, he broke 3 of those covenants that you don't do, and then you went to the women's section of the tent that you absolutely do not do. So then Barak comes around, and they destroy the rest of the army, and then there's peace in Israel for 40 years, which at that time period is, pretty decent. We're going to go to Judges 11 next, but, it mentions in Hebrew 11, it doesn't mention Jael, it doesn't mention Deborah, it mentions Barak, which is interesting because you're just like, well, he's kind of in the story, but he had to take such a walk of faith with God, even though he's just like, but Deborah, I need your help, that God made sure that everything came to pass. There was peace in Israel for 40 years. He listened to a woman that didn't really ever happen. There's a massive rainstorm that destroys all of the Canaan army. And then, the death of the king went to Jael, but, it saved him another kill. He just killed, plenty of other people. But because of his faith walk with God, there was peace in Israel for 40 years, which, if you look through there's like, oh, there's peace for 1.5 years, and then everyone whines. And then there's peace for like 6 months. Oh, there's, and then they did evil in the sight of the Lord. So 40 years was a good chunk of time back then, in comparison. But he, he's like, oh, okay, God, I'm outgunned here. I'm listening to a woman. I don't know what's going to happen, but all right, let's keep on moving. Sure enough, it all lines into place. So Jephthah, which I've heard of, but not like every other random dude in the Old Testament that has a weird name. You're like, okay. He's mentioned, and he's not, I don't know, he's not really a common guy that you actually read a story, you're just like, huh? So Judges 11, who wants to read? Joey, can you read verses 1 through 11?
Chapter 11, verse 1. Now Jephthah, the Gileadite, was a mighty man of valor, and he was the son of an harlot.
That's a real harlot, not an innkeeper harlot,
Okay.
another kind of harlot.
All right. And Gilead begat Jephthah. And Gilead's wife bare him sons, and his wife's sons grew up, and they thrust out Jephthah, and said unto him, Thou shalt not inherit in our father's house, for thou art the son of a strange woman. Then Jephthah fled from his brethren, and dwelt in the land of Tob. And there were gathered vain men to Jephthah, and went out with him. And it came to pass in the process of time that the children of Ammon made war against Israel. And it was so that when the children of Ammon made war against Israel, the elders of Gilead went to fetch Jephthah out of the land of Tob. And they said unto Jephthah, Come and be our captain, that we may fight with the children of Ammon. And Jephthah said unto the elders of Gilead, Did not ye hate me and expel me out of my father's house? And why are you come unto me now, when you are in distress? And the elders of Gilead said to Jephthah, Therefore we turn again to thee now, that thou mayest go with us, and fight against the children of Ammon, and be our head over the inhabitants of Gilead. And Jephthah said unto the elders of Gilead, If you bring me home again to fight against the children of Ammon, and the Lord deliver them before me, shall I be your head? And the elders of Gilead said to Jephthah, The Lord be witness between us, if we do not do so according to thy words. Then Jephthah went with the elders of Gilead, and the people made him head and captain over them. And Jephthah uttered all his words before the Lord in Mizpah.
So Jephthah gets run out of his house because he has a different mom than his brothers, and mom wasn't a stand-up person apparently. And then he goes and hangs out with these not so good dudes that, you know, it's kind of like a gang, and it says Vane there, and then I think ESV says, well, they're just not cool. Worthless fellows. So he gets run out of his house, and then he hangs out with a bunch of worthless fellows and does some shenanigans, I'm sure. And then the guys come back and are like, yo, can we get your help to defeat the Amorites? Because it says he was a mighty man of valor. So you think that, you know, from his background, he wouldn't necessarily be a mighty man of valor from his worthless fellows that he's hanging out with. But he's like, which I like that he laughs. He's like, didn't you kick me out of my house and run me out of town, and now you want my help? Like, why should I help you? Like, I'm hanging out with these worthless fellows. I don't need you. So if you're put in that situation, you're just like, okay, so I can either put my trust in God that there is a reason why all this is happening, or I can just, you know, be like, all right, well, sorry, you guys kicked me out of my house, and I don't want to talk to you. I'm going to go gamble, or whatever it is that they were doing with these worthless fellows. And he's like, fine, okay, I'll help you guys, but the Lord's with me. That's why it's going to work, and I want to go back home. They're like, all right, fine, deal. All right, fine. We'll make a deal with you, Jephthah. So then the next couple verses, he sends letters to the Amorite king, and he's like, yo, my lord's fighting for me. If you don't, you're going to die. And, you know, as every other king that happens to, he's like, okay, not happening. And so he doesn't believe him. And Jephthah's like, keep sending him letters. He's like, yo, this is what's going to happen next. The Lord, my God, is fighting for me, and this is what's going to happen. It's like, I don't believe you. He's like, well, all right, we'll find out. Who wants to read verse 29 through 33? Jessica, go ahead. 29 through 33.
Then the Spirit of the Lord was upon Jephthah, and he passed through Gilead and Messiah, and passed on to Mizpah of Gilead, and from Mizpah of Gilead he passed on to the Amorites. And Jephthah made a vow to the Lord and said, if you will give the Amorites into my hand, then whatever comes out of my doors of my house to meet me, then I will return in peace from the Amorites, shall be the Lord's, and I will offer it up for a burnt offering. So Jephthah crossed over to the Amorites to fight against them, and the Lord gave them into his hand. And he struck them from Arnar to the neighborhood of Mithith, 20 cities, and as far as Abel-Keramim, with a great blow. So the Amorites were subdued before the people of Israel.
So, like we learned from the last story, you don't vow a vow to the Lord unless you really mean it. So he's like, all right, these dudes kicked me out of my house, then they made fun of me, now I'm hanging out with these other bad guys, and then they came back and were like, yo, help us defeat this army because you're a mighty man of valor. And he's like, fine. And he's like, all right, God, I'm vowing a vow that when we defeat this army together, whatever comes out of my house to greet me is yours, you know, as long as we can do this together. And so, sure enough, Amorite king gets destroyed, and look at that, God came through again. Weird, right? But the cool thing about Jephthah is that the vow that he makes, whatever comes out to greet me, like it could have been a dog, it could have been a frog, it could have been anything. He just was like, all right, God, whatever comes out and greets me, that's for you. That is my, my vow. So who wants to read verse 34? Tibby.
Then Jephthah came to his home at Mizpah, and behold, his daughter came out to
Yeah.
meet him with tambourines and with dances. She was his only child. Besides her, he had neither son nor daughter.
So he has two choices here. He can either honor that vow with God, and his daughter gets, a temple servant basically, as we'll see in that a little bit, or he can run away and hope that God doesn't find him and because he broke his vow. But Jephthah honors his vow, and he's very sad about it because it's his daughter. He doesn't have any other kids, so that's the end of his family line. So basically in the next following verses, so his daughter wasn't married, so when you weren't married and didn't have any kids in that time period, you were considered cursed. So before, and most of them went to temple service anyways, so before they went to temple service, they got 2 months to go kick it with their friends in the mountains and do whatever. I don't know if they partied or not, but they got 2 months. So in the following verses, it talks about the 2 months that she goes with her friends to the mountains and she honors the vow that her father made. And she's like, Dad, this sucks, but you got a vow to the Lord. The Lord came through for you. This is what needs to happen next. And so she goes to the mountains for 2 months, and then she goes to the temple service the rest of her life. So she gets the robes and shaves her head and all of her jewelry and fashionable stuff. She was a princess at that time, went basically to the church. So then it talks about later, or it talks about everyone is sad for 4 days a year in sadness of Jephthah's daughter. But then you see it later on where it's like, well, then we get to go and see Jephthah's daughter in the temple and be like, hey, that's awesome that you honored your father's vow because you didn't have to do that. That wasn't your life. That was his vow with God. But Jephthah took the faith that, all right, God, like, whatever needs to happen, it's going to happen, whether it's a crappy situation or not. Didn't expect my daughter to come out and greet me, but here it is. So this may be an unfortunate, my family line is now no longer there, but the daughter gets to hang out in the temple for the rest of her life and serve God, which is pretty nifty. So you have very, different people, different backgrounds. Maybe the innkeeper who talks to all these people who's like, I have a choice to make. I trust that God means what he's going to say, and this is the land that he promised his people, and I can hide these spies that are going to destroy my land. Or I could not and pray for the best and get destroyed with everybody else, which it's a good thing that she listened to God because that Christ line came through her. Then you have Barak who's like, I'm sorry, you want me to do what? You're a woman and you're telling me to do what? I'm outgunned, what? Fine, I'll go, but you need to go with me because you can hear from God. So, and then you have Jephthah who's like, kind of a shenanigans. You're just like, you look at that background and you're just like, is this really the God? This God really wants to choose this person who's doing all this stuff as part of his end goal? Like, okay. So you have three distinct different people that are mentioned in the Hall of Faith, which if they had not stood with God, well, the Antichrist line wouldn't have been there. There wouldn't have been peace in Israel for that time period. And then, it says Jephthah served for 6 years, there was peace. So maybe not as long of peace, but it's set up for the next person who walk with God and go from there. So no matter what the situation that you're in, whether you're, making a vow to God that your child's going to the temple, or whether you're hanging out with shenaniganers, or whether you're just like hanging out and you're like, all right, God, I don't know what the next step is, but I know that you know what the next step is, so we're going to continue to move forward regardless of how I feel about that situation. So that's those three.